What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. On here talking some college football with you all on this episode. I want to discuss how Nico Iamaleava has made Nick Saban's biggest fear when it comes to NIL come true. There's a lie about Lincoln Riley's departure from Oklahoma that's gone on for far too long, and somebody has to say something about it. Somebody has to debunk these lies about why he left Norman for USC. Colorado is retiring the jerseys of Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, which I don't have an issue with Travis Hunter's jerseys being retired. Don't really have too big of an issue with Shedeur's neither, but I still somewhat disagree with it to a certain point. Oklahoma is about to end the disrespect that they've been receiving from the SEC. Lane Kiffin has been doing the press run as of late. He's been on a good amount of podcasts, and he recently threw a haymaker at Carson Beck and Miami when he was on the pivot. And there's a problem with Tennessee's offense that we'll get into as well, as far as how this offense prepares their players for the next level. Before we dive into it, if you support the pod and you want to help us grow, all we ask is that you hit that like button. It helps us rank higher in the YouTube search algorithm. Subscribe, turn on post notifications if you're new. You can also find this episode and all of our previous episodes on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Links are down in the description down below. Give us a 5-star review if you enjoy, and let's dive into it. A few years ago, when name, image, and likeness first became a big thing in college football, Nick Saban had pushed back against it. Now, he never was against players getting paid. He said that NIL gave his players more opportunities than ever before to earn money. But he said that the current model with no guidelines, no regulations was unsustainable, and it will give players too much power to where it will create pay for play. And when Nick Saban, after he coached his final game at Alabama, he realized that the sport he grew up coaching for so many years was no longer recognizable for him. A year ago, Alabama was a 4th and goal stop away from making it to the national championship. When they lost to Michigan in the Rose Bowl, right after that game, the day later, Nick Saban, he walks into his offense. He's putting in work like he always does. And then he ends up having a line of players at his office. Instead of, being sad about how the outcome of the game transpired because, they were once again one play short of making it to the national championship, guys are asking about playing time and how much more NIL money they can earn. And that right there was the main reason for why Nick Saban decided to retire. Because the sport has now become all about how much money can you get instead of prioritizing the team and the future for a lot of these players. Instead of trying to find a school that's the best fit for them, that gives them the best chance to get developed for the NFL so they can earn the even bigger bag at that level, you now have players such as Nico Iamaleava that are just bag chasing and not really putting their development in the forefront when it comes to making decisions. And the current Nico Iamaleava situation that's gone on between him and Tennessee, he recently asked for $4 million in NIL revenue. Tennessee wasn't really willing to budge, and then he decides to no-show practice. It was the first NIL holdout that we've had of this magnitude, and there's some rumors that say that he was even willing to hold out of Tennessee's playoff game. He was trying to use that as leverage in his NIL negotiations. And now with Nico in the transfer portal, it looks like he's leaning towards going to UCLA, where he's going to make even less NIL money than what he was making at Tennessee. This pretty much was everything that Nick Saban was warning us about when it came to name, image, and likeness. Remember, we initially thought that NIL was going to allow players to get compensated from their name, image, and likenesses in commercials, sponsorships, brand deals. They could sign autographs now and get paid for that as well. But all it's been is pay for play disguised and the biggest lie in college football. And I never understand when anytime a player asks for money and you have folks in the media who end up siding with the player saying that, oh, the NCAA has been making so much money off these guys for so long, they deserve to get paid what they're asking for. I get so irritated when I see this because it's not like these guys aren't getting paid. Nico is making $2.7 million. How much of a bigger slice of a pie does he need? These players, just because they have these insane NIL demands, doesn't mean that these schools, these coaches are obligated to concede to them. It's an open market. You can go wherever you feel gives you the best chance to get paid. But at the same time, these teams don't have to cave to your demands. And now you have players that are less prepared for the NFL than what they've ever been, because instead of trying to find a program that's the best fit for their skill set, they rather find the schools that gives them the opportunity to cash out while they don't get developed properly, and they end up going to the NFL missing out on an even bigger payday because they're not good enough to even get to a second contract. And this is what Nick Saban was trying to point out. But you had a lot of people who were ignorant when Nick Saban first made these comments. They wanted to use the whole argument saying that, oh, Nick Saban's just mad because he no longer is the only coach who can pay these players. He's mad that there's going to be a level playing field. Now, Alabama isn't going to have the big talent advantage that they used to have. No, that never was the reason for Nick Saban's comments. And now we look back at his warning and it's come true. And now all of a sudden, people are starting to realize the nightmare that NIL has turned into that made Nick Saban against it initially. It never had anything to do with players getting compensated. It had everything to do about how pay for play is what this sport has turned into. You got colleges that are stealing players off other teams. Deion just called out Virginia for pretty much tampering with one of the running backs that was on his team, saying that, hey, brother, we'll give you way more money if you come play for us, despite him not even entering the transfer portal. This is what college football is now. It's the wild, wild west. There was a Big 12 staffer that said that if you're not tampering or you're not trying to poach players off other teams, you're putting your university and your squad at a disadvantage. Because if everybody's doing it and you don't want to adapt, then you're going to end up getting left behind and you're not going to be able to succeed in this new landscape of college football. And Nico Iamaleava, from the potential playoff holdout to the spring practice holdout, is what Nick Saban feared the most when it came to name, image, and likeness. We have been fooled. We've been duped because we thought that all this was these guys were going to be in Dr. Pepper commercials, Hulu commercials, doing some promotion for Uber Eats. But I ain't see Nico Iamaleava in that commercial, did you? I ain't see Nico in no Dr. Pepper commercial. I ain't see him in no Uber Eats commercial. Hell, I barely seen him post any sponsors or brand deals on his Instagram page. So NIL has been disguised as this facade when all it is now allowing these schools to just pay these players and make it like the NFL. And that is what Nick Saban feared the most about name, image, and likeness. And now we all are starting to see the problems that have arisen from this and why Nick Saban was so fearful of this. I don't think that he was against players getting compensated. All it does is help Alabama. They can pay anybody. Nick Saban, you know what his mantra is. He'll give you a warning, and then when you don't listen, he'll use it to continue to dominate. And unfortunately, it got to a point where Nick Saban was just fed up and he didn't want to put up with it anymore. We were a 4th and goal away from making it to the national championship. And a day later, instead of you being sad about it, being in your feelings about it, you're like, man, how much PT am I going to get, coach? How much are you going to pay me to stay? Do you not know how devastating that had to be for Nick Saban? Him and Miss Terry used to open their doors on holidays for players to come to their house. They get a nice cooked meal. It used to be about building a brotherhood, building a bond, building a relationship with your players, and trying to help them blossom into the best version of themselves so they can make it to the NFL and get an even bigger bag. But no, you want these players who want to get it all right away while deprioritizing the NFL and peaking early in college when they're too short-minded to realize that if you chase the bag in college and you don't get developed properly, like what has happened with Nico Iamaleava, that money's going to eventually run dry very fast. And then you're going to miss out on the big generational bag where you got quarterbacks signing $200 million deals in the National Football League, but since you didn't get developed properly because you didn't go to the team that was the best scheme fit for your abilities, you went to the team that offered you the most money, and then you ended up not becoming a good enough player to warrant getting that generational kind of money at the next level. The excuse that Nico's camp is throwing out for why he transferred from Tennessee is that they didn't want to change the offense around for him. And if that was the issue, you should have never went to Tennessee in the first place. But that was what Nick Saban's point was. You see what Nick Saban was trying to say? Nico, and his family thought Tennessee would change their offense around for him. But they were naive to believe that because Josh Heupel's offense, look, these coaches, as much as they want to develop these players for the NFL, they still want to win. And Josh Heupel's offense gives Tennessee the best chance to do that. If Nico and his camp truly cared about Nico being in the right system to prepare him for the NFL, instead of chasing the bag, they should have went to a school that ran a system that gave them the best shot of having Nico ready in the NFL, that put Nico in somewhat of a NFL-style offense. Instead of going to Tennessee, he should have stayed home and went to USC or went to a school like Miami or a school that ran a pro-style system. Now you want to cry wolf and use this as a cop-out for why you overplayed your hand when you really were seeking a bigger payday. That's why they say money or the love of money is the root of all evil. And this is what Nick Saban feared the most. And the Nico Iamaleava situation has made Nick Saban's NIL warning come true. Guys are chasing the bag, not prioritizing development, and they're missing out on the generational money that they would be getting in the NFL if they would have prioritized their development more instead of just trying to cash out early in their careers. Haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content. There's a big lie that has been going on for far too long about why Lincoln Riley did from Oklahoma to coach USC. Lincoln Riley last season was 2-0 against the SEC. He smacked LSU and Brian Kelly week 1, and then he smacked Texas A&M and USC's bowl game to end the year. And overall, Lincoln Riley is 3-3 against the SEC. He's 18-15 against ranked teams. Lincoln Riley didn't leave Oklahoma to duck smoke from the SEC. Lincoln Riley is one of the better coaches in all of college football. There is no school that's QBU. Lincoln Riley is QBU. If you want to be developed and you want to end up being put in a situation that gives you the best chance to succeed at the NFL, you go play for Lincoln Riley. He didn't leave Oklahoma because he was running from the SEC. He left Oklahoma because he felt like USC had more resources with the recruiting location, and also would make it a lot easier to assemble a national championship caliber team. Plus, at the time, Oklahoma's NIL wasn't aligned the way that Lincoln Riley wanted. And also, living in Los Angeles, California is way better than living in Norman, Oklahoma. Not trying to take any shots to you Oklahoma fans. I'm pretty sure that Norman is a pretty nice place to live, but LA has nice weather. You're living close to the beaches. It's a very nice place to live, depending on what parts of Los Angeles you reside in. Lincoln left USC because he felt it was the best decision for his career. He felt like he peaked at Oklahoma. He felt like he got the most out of that program than what he ever was going to get. But we got to stop with this lie saying that Lincoln Riley was running from the SEC. These coaches want to compete with the best. They don't want to run for no competition. They want to show that they're a good enough coach that they can beat any team they play against. That's why at the start of the season, you start to see less of these big schools scheduling these FCS programs, and they end up scheduling these big games. We have more big week one matchups this year than what we've had in recent memory. Hell, they tried to say that Lincoln Riley and USC was scared to play LSU. They tried to get out of the game, and what did they do? They end up kicking LSU's ass. Y'all tried to push the narrative that Lincoln and USC was scared to play LSU last year, and they won that game, and then you still continue to push this lie that Lincoln Riley was ducking smoke from the SEC. Lincoln Riley isn't ducking no smoke. He has no problem going up against any SEC team, and the 3 SEC schools that he has lost to all came in the college football playoffs because they were just outright better. The reason why Lincoln left Oklahoma in the first place was due to the talent disadvantage that he had at Oklahoma anytime he went up against Alabama, Georgia. That shootout that they had when they had Baker Mayfield at the helm at quarterback and they were going toe-to-toe with Georgia, they had that big lead and they eventually blew it in the end. And then they end up getting blown out by one of the greatest college football teams ever, that 2019 LSU squad, when Lincoln Riley had Jalen Hurts as his quarterback that year in Norman. The talent disadvantage that Lincoln Riley had at Oklahoma when he went into the college football playoffs is what pushed him to leave Oklahoma. Now, Brent Venables has done a very good job of being able to elevate Oklahoma's program and the areas that Lincoln Riley came short in, which was recruiting. Oklahoma's recruiting is far better under Brent Venables than what it ever was under Lincoln Riley. But maybe Lincoln Riley, just being in that location, wasn't able to maximize recruiting how he would hope. And that's why he made the transition from OU to USC, because it was just a lot easier for him to recruit. And then with college football being the way that it is now, with you being able to hire a general manager, you don't even have to worry about recruiting that much. It shows why Lincoln Riley's move to USC was justified, and it was the right decision. It had nothing to do with him being scared of the SEC. He probably knew that USC was going to be playing in the Big Ten. No matter what, even if Lincoln Riley was ducking smoke from the SEC, you can't run from this conference. You're going to have to face them eventually, rather if you play them in the regular season or if you have to play them in the college football playoffs. But let's not act like these coaches are scared of the SEC and the Big Ten. This is the same conference that had the worst teams in it beating some of the best teams in the conference. Like, Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. Alabama lost to Oklahoma. You know, this conference last year wasn't as good as what it normally is. And I don't really believe that this whole narrative of Lincoln running from this conference is true. I just think that Oklahoma fans like to use it to make themselves feel better about Lincoln's departure. But Lincoln has had success at USC. He won double-digit games his first season. Brent Venables has had success at Oklahoma. Why can't we just say that both parties somewhat won in some capacity, even though Lincoln has been better at USC than what Brent Venables has been at Oklahoma up to this point? It wasn't a move that Lincoln made just because he was pissing his pants of the SEC. Let's stop this narrative. Let's stop it. History, tradition, and pageantry is what makes college football the great sport that it is. And Colorado won a national championship in 1990 with Eric Bieniemy, who finished third in Heisman voting that year, being the best player on that squad. His jersey has yet to be retired. Kordell Stewart, a.k.a. Slash Stewart, is one of the greatest players in the history of Colorado football. He somewhat started the golden era of Colorado football when he played, and his jersey hasn't been honored. Yet, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders are getting their jerseys retired. I have nothing wrong with Travis Hunter's jersey being retired because most schools retire the jerseys of their Heisman Trophy winners. Caleb Williams recently got his jersey retired by USC last year because he won the Heisman. It normally is a tradition that you retire your Heisman Trophy winner's jersey. However, Shedeur Sanders hasn't won a Heisman Trophy. He's been a great player for Colorado, definitely one of the greatest players in Colorado football history. But if his jersey is being retired before Kordell Stewart and Eric Bieniemy, who contributed to Colorado's only national championship, it's pretty much Deion Sanders and this Colorado administration spitting in the faces of the legends that paved the way for what Colorado is today. And although I am a huge supporter of Deion Sanders, and I respect everything that he has done for Colorado football up to this point, we can't deny that he has saved this program. But I heard him in a recent press conference pretty much shit on the history of this program, saying, you know, why should I care about something that I don't really know about, that I wasn't there to witness? As a head coach, when you take over a program, you also inherit the history of it. Colorado, for as down of what they've been for the past decade, they have history. History is part of what makes this sport great. And Deion pretty much is spitting in the face of Colorado's history, saying that everything that happened before me never happened. He's acting as if he is Colorado football. He's acting like he is the one who should be making a history, and what has come before it is irrelevant. And I strongly disagree with that. Look, Colorado's irrelevancy for the past 2 decades doesn't erase the history of this program. You had, at one point, what was one of the better programs in college football for a good run up until things eventually fell apart once you got into the early 2000s. But for Shedeur Sanders to have his jersey retired before Eric Bieniemy, who was an All-American, a Heisman finalist, and the best player on the national championship team, is disrespectful to him. He should have had his jersey retired. And you can say, well, it's not Deion's job to worry about guys who haven't had their jerseys retired. That is true. But it also is somewhat his job to represent the school and to honor the history of the program. And how he's gone about discussing this situation really disappoints me, because I've always viewed Deion as somebody that's always classy, honorable, and respectful. And they always say you're supposed to honor the people who came before you. You're supposed to honor the OGs. Bill Belichick at North Carolina right now, he wants to honor the history of that program. Cam Ward had the greatest single season ever for a quarterback at Miami, and his jersey hasn't been retired, and it probably won't be retired. I have nothing against Shedeur Sanders' jersey being retired. What my problem is that his jersey is being retired before guys like Kordell, Stewart, and Bieniemy, who done much more for Colorado football than what Shedeur has. Nobody's denying that Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter made the ultimate sacrifice for Colorado to have that 9-4 season that they just had, one of the better seasons that they've had in recent memory. But you can still honor those guys without shitting on the history of this program. Deion's making it seem like Colorado was nothing before he got there. This program has some history. They won a national championship. You won 9 games. So I don't think you have the right to have your chest poked out like you actually did something when you've done something relatively small compared to what guys like Bieniemy and Kordell Stewart have. And that's my problem with Deion Sanders. And I feel like in his recent contract extension, Colorado kind of put it in there, or they kind of got on their knees for him and said, hey, man, like, also, if you re-sign this contract with us and you stay and you don't leave, we're going to retire the jersey of your son. Let's not act like Deion hasn't been known for having a big ego. And what better way to gloat your ego than having your son, who shares your last name's jersey, honored and immortalized forever in the history of this program with having it engraved on the side of the stadium. Nobody's mad about Travis Hunter's jersey being retired. And nobody really is upset about Shedeur's jersey being retired. Nobody's saying that he doesn't deserve it. But it just feels too soon. When you have other guys that should have had their jerseys honored for a very long time. And I refuse to believe that Deion didn't have a say in this. Deion has so much pull in that Colorado program. It's crazy. And he's not wrong to have this kind of pull considering what he has done for this program. But I just feel with his comments for how he has justified Shedeur Sanders' jersey being retired is disrespectful. And it's just spitting in the face of the legends of Colorado football and the history of this program. To pretty much say that you don't really care, you only care about the guys that you're coaching, I feel it's really tone deaf to what makes this sport great. College football is rooted in pageantry. It's rooted in history. It's rooted in tradition. You can honor the current while also being able to pay homage to the past. And that's my biggest issue with the recent comments that Deion has made and how he's going about the retirement of Shedeur Sanders' jersey. Hey, man, if you listen to podcasts, check us out on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Give us a 5-star review if you enjoy. History does not determine football games. Oklahoma is not the same team this year that they were last year, their first year in the SEC, yet they continue to get disrespected by this conference because the changes and the improvements that Brent Venables has made have been overlooked. This offense was atrocious in 2024, mainly due to Brent Venables whiffing on the promotion of Seth Luttrell to replace Jeff Lebby as his offensive coordinator, not getting it right at quarterback. Jackson Arnold was really bad last year. He was so bad when Oklahoma played Tennessee to the point where I literally thought that he got paid by Vegas to lose that game on purpose, just with how he was giving out turnovers like it was Christmas in October. And with Brent Venables completely overhauling the offense, bringing in an influx of talent in the portal with John Matier, who follows Ben Arbuckle from Washington State to Norman, there's a really good chance that Oklahoma can compete for the college football playoffs. Oklahoma has always been able to compete with some of the best programs in college football, the SEC included. Brent Venables' first 2 years, he brought in top 10 recruiting classes. We seem to forget that he also has beaten Texas. Yet, the SEC still continues to look down upon Oklahoma like they're Northwestern, like they're Vanderbilt, like they're just some pushover program. And that's why this season, Oklahoma is about to put an end to the SEC disrespect, because I expect this to be a 9, possibly 10-win team with the improvements that Brent Venables has made. He's taken over the play calling on defense. Even though he didn't call the plays in the past, he still has had a big influence on how the defense is ran. And offensively, with John Mateer, your offense is going to be tremendously improved just with you at the bare worst getting average quarterback play. If Oklahoma had average quarterback play last year, they probably would have been an 8-win team due to how good their defense was. The problem holding this program back has nothing to do with talent. It has everything to do with execution on the field, and that's something that Oklahoma didn't do a good job of last year, mainly due to injuries. When Oklahoma's 2024 season gets talked about, what often gets left out is the amount of injuries that they suffered before the season even started. The Oklahoma season was done right after fall camp concluded. They had injuries on the offensive line, at receiver. You got a new OC with the new quarterback that's young, doesn't have that much experience. When you're in a conference as competitive and deep as what the SEC is, when you're down multiple starters and you got to start a lot of freshmen and you don't really have a lot of depth, it doesn't matter if you're Georgia, Alabama, Texas, or anybody, you're not going to be able to survive in the SEC. You're going to get eaten alive. Injuries are a killer for a lot of teams that could have promising seasons. And it's just one of those things where if you're Brent Venables, you got to act like last year never really happened. Of course, you have to acknowledge the mistakes that you made, which he has, which is why he has been Arbuckle calling the plays now on offense, which is why he has Jackson Arnold now gone and has replaced him with John Mateer. You're bringing in top-tier talent out of the portal. Brent Venables has a lot to prove this year. I'm not holding water for him. I'm not making excuses for him. I know and he knows that he's coaching for his job this year. But the changes that Brent Venables has made to Oklahoma football this offseason is definitely going to pay dividends on the field this year, and you definitely can see significant improvement in the win column despite them having the toughest schedule in college football. Look, everybody that plays in the SEC has a tough schedule. Even if you don't have as many away games as what Oklahoma has, or you don't have to play as many of the top tier teams. We saw Alabama lose to Oklahoma. Despite Alabama being the strong favorite to win that game, they were expected to blow out OU. We saw Kentucky, the worst team in the SEC last year, beat Ole Miss, who is one of the better teams in this conference. Despite how difficult the schedule may look, everybody's playing a difficult schedule in the SEC. This conference has shown time in and time out that you can't overlook anybody that you play, no matter if you're playing them at home or on the road. So Oklahoma's schedule being tough still doesn't scare me away from my prediction that this is going to be a 9-win team and a possible college football playoff contender. If Oklahoma goes 9-3 this year, I definitely can see them getting into the CFP as a 12th or 11th seed. A 9-win team, a 3-loss team is going to get into the playoffs. And we would have had one last year if Ole Miss and Alabama didn't have the upset losses that they sustained. But what happened to Alabama and Ole Miss perfectly shows why strength of schedule is kind of overrated now. You could go up against teams that before the season on paper look to be really good, and then the season rolls around and they're not that great. And you could see teams that may be projected to be bad, like how Vanderbilt was last year, and they end up being a halfway decent team. It's too early to judge Oklahoma and their strength of schedule as a reason for why they have no shot at making it to the playoffs when the talent's there. They got good quarterback play. We know the defense is going to be good. The defense is never a question when it comes to Brent Venables. And if they're able to stay healthy, this will be the most improved team in college football this year. Lane Kiffin has been doing a press run as of late. I've been seeing him pop up on a good amount of podcasts lately, and he recently was on the Pivot with Fred Taylor, Shannon Crowder, and Ryan Clark, and they got to the discussion of NIL and they threw out how much money Miami paid Carson Beck, and Lane Kiffin had the audacity to throw a haymaker at Carson Beck in Miami saying they paid him how much? Did they not see how he played against us last year? And look, I'm not saying that Lane Kiffin is right, but I'm not also going to say that he isn't wrong neither. Yes, Carson Beck didn't have the greatest game when Georgia played Ole Miss last year, but it wasn't all due to Carson Beck not being good. The talent around him wasn't good. The offensive line was getting pushed around all afternoon in that game against Ole Miss defensive line. And from a talent standpoint, that wasn't a good Georgia team compared to the standard that we've seen out of Kirby Smart and that squad in years past. We saw how good Carson Beck can be in 2023 when he has a solid offensive line. He has receivers that actually know how to catch the football. You know, this haymaker or this stray that Lane Kiffin threw at Miami and Carson Beck, I feel was a little bit unwarranted. Carson Beck is going to be solid for the Hurricanes this year. Is he going to be Cam Ward? Absolutely not. Is he going to be a Heisman contender? Probably not. But he's going to be able to do something that Cam Ward was unable to do. And it wasn't all Cam Ward's fault why this didn't happen, but Carson Beck could actually lead Miami to the best season that they've had since the early 2000s, where they actually make it to the ACC championship, they win it, and they make it to the college football playoffs, and maybe they win a playoff game or two. Carson Beck has the best situation that he's ever played in all his years playing college football. $4 million for a proven quarterback that has won at the highest level, that's been to a SEC conference championship game. He actually won it. Listen, you can say that Gunnar Stockton won it for Georgia all you want to, but Carson Beck got Georgia to that point. And if he would have stayed healthy, there's a pretty good chance that Georgia probably ends up winning that SEC championship game with Carson Beck being the starter more convincingly due to how good their defense played against Steve Sarkisian's offense. Mario Cristobal is my biggest issue with Miami this year. I don't trust him. I trust Carson Beck. He doesn't need to light the world on fire. Let's not forget, Lane Kiffin, that Carson Beck was a projected first-round pick at the start of last season. And even then, if he would have cleared for this year's draft, he would have been viewed higher than what Jackson Dart is. Jackson Dart is not that good. The only reason Jackson Dart's numbers look as good as what they are is because your system helped inflate his numbers. Your system has shown time in and time out that it doesn't equate to quarterbacks being successful at the next level. Last year, we saw Cam Ward elevate his draft stock when he came to Miami. He went from being a projected second-round pick to becoming the first overall pick in this year's draft. Miami is pretty much transfer quarterback you if you are a quarterback that's looking to improve their draft stock, looking to get paid as well, so you can also get a bigger payday when you declare for the NFL draft following the season. Lane Kiffin taking this shot at Carson Beck in Miami, I'm not going to say that he was completely wrong. You know, even I kind of was looking at the NIL number that Miami threw at Carson Beck, and I was saying, you know, I don't know if I'll pay him $4 million, but I don't think it's a completely bad contract or a completely bad deal that they gave him. It's hard to find serviceable quarterback playing college football. I'm pretty sure if Oklahoma had the ability to pay Carson Beck $4 million before last season, if they knew how bad their quarterback play was going to be, they would have did it. When you have quarterback play that was as bad as what Miami had during the second half of the Park-Talk Bowl with Emory Williams, and you don't really have a lot of options out there because Carson Beck wasn't the only quarterback that Miami went after. Initially, they went after John Mateer, but Oklahoma just put a little bit more money towards him, and also he wanted to follow his OC from Washington State to OU, so it made perfect sense why Miami didn't walk away with him. But they also, going after Carson Beck, didn't make a bad decision. Carson Beck was arguably the best quarterback in the portal this past cycle. And Miami could have done a lot worse than him. Carson Beck gives Miami a shot to be a playoff team if he's able to play at the level that he did in 2023. But let's not make it seem like Carson Beck is some garbage quarterback and he wasn't failed by receivers constantly dropping passes, the offensive line not playing up to the standard that we've normally have seen a Georgia offensive line perform these last couple of years under Kirby Smart. The situation Carson Beck is walking into is tailor-made for him to have a successful 2025 campaign, put himself back into first-round consideration in next year's draft, and possibly elevate Miami to a level that they were unable to reach with Cam Ward due to the defense failing them. If Miami had a better defense last year, at least an average defense, they wouldn't have won the ACC. Now with a new defensive coordinator, a defense that is going to be giving up a million bajillion yards to Duke and Syracuse, all Carson Beck needs to be is a really highly efficient game manager. And as long as Mario Cristobal's awful clock management doesn't screw Miami this year, there's no reason why Carson Beck shouldn't be able to lead this program to their first ACC championship. Miami's been in the Atlantic Coastal Conference for how many years, and they've yet to win an ACC title? You know, I think Carson Beck getting this haymaker thrown at him by Lane Kiffin was a little bit in left field and a little bit unjust. You know, Lane Kiffin, I like you a lot. You're my favorite coach in college football, but I feel like you were a little bit wrong in this one, but I also feel you were a little bit right because it's like $4 million to Carson Beck. You're going from Cam Ward to Carson Beck. So I understand it, but at the same time, you got to understand the situation that Miami was in, brother. You're overlooking how bad Emmy Williams played in the Pop-Tart Bowl. Miami kind of had no choice but to throw whatever they needed to throw at Carson Beck to incentivize him to come play for this program this year. And with Shannon Dawson calling the plays, having good receivers, a great offensive line, a good run game, something that Carson Beck didn't have at Georgia. Everything that Carson Beck didn't have at Georgia last year, he is receiving from the Hurricanes this year. More NIL money, a better O-line, a legitimate rushing attack, receivers that can actually catch the damn football. I'm not saying you're completely wrong, but I'm just saying you're leaving out a lot of context about why Carson Beck had the performance that he had when Georgia lost to Ole Miss. Nico Iamaleava's team is trying to play damage control. They realized that they overplayed their hands with their insane NIL demands that they wanted from Tennessee, seeking $4 million. He ends up hitting the portal, and now he's expected to make somewhere around $1 to $1.5 million if he transfers to UCLA. Now they're trying to use the excuse that Nico didn't transfer from Tennessee because he was seeking more money. He was transferring because he wanted to be in the offense that better prepared him for the NFL. And if that truly is the reason, why would you commit to Tennessee in the first place if you knew the track record Josh Heupel had with his system and how he'd equated to guys' performance at the next level? You came to Tennessee because you wanted to go to the school that gave you the most money. You knew doggone well that Josh Heupel was not going to change his system just because of Nico Iamaleava. Because if you're Josh Heupel, why the hell would I change my offensive philosophy when it has resulted in me having a ton of success? However, though, there is a little bit of truth to this. Not more so of Nico Iamaleava for why he left, but more so this offense is anti-NFL. Playing in Josh Heupel's offense puts you at a disadvantage when you end up making it to the National Football League, because a lot of concepts that are ran in this offense, you never see ran at that level in the NFL because of how wide the splits are. This offense kind of is considered gimmicky because it's a college football offense. It takes advantage of the wide margins, how the field is set up in college football, and that's why when you see a lot of these Tennessee guys make it to the next level, they don't really do too much. Joe Milton, He put up good numbers in this offense. Same thing that Hendon Hooker. But this offense is quarterback friendly. It makes it easy to put up godly numbers. And Hendon Hooker probably is the best quarterback that Josh Heupel probably will ever have come through Tennessee that has NFL traits. Or run that back. Nico Iamaleava's team is trying to play damage control because they now realize that they overplayed their hand with their outrageous NIL demand, seeking $4 million from Tennessee. They didn't get that. They held out. Tennessee pretty much told them to go kick rocks. And now that they're in the portal, they've come to the harsh realization that nobody is going to bend to their huge... Run that back. Nico Iamaleava's team is trying to play damage control because they realized that they overplayed their hands with their outrageous NIL demands that they were seeking from Tennessee, asking for $4 million. Tennessee pretty much told them to go kick rocks after Nico Iamaleava didn't show up to practice. And now that he's in the transfer portal, no other team is willing to come anywhere close to the number that they were asking for. Now they have to spin the narrative that, oh, we didn't leave Tennessee because of money. We left because we wanted the offense to change. Josh Heupel has had success running this offense for several years. Hendon Hooker, Joe Milton, they put up godly numbers in this offense. Nico knew the track record Josh Heupel had with quarterbacks in this system. He also knew that this system also didn't really do a good job of preparing those guys for success in the NFL. But the reason why he committed to Tennessee was because the money that they threw at him. And if they would have bent to his NIL demands and he would have got paid that $4 million that him and his family were asking for, nobody would be talking about the offense. But even though I disagree, and I feel it's a little bit of a facade that they're using to try to clean up their image somewhat because things haven't gone in their favor. They want to use the offense as a cop-out. There is a little bit of truth to what they're saying about the offense. Josh Heupel runs a system that takes advantage of the field in college football with this veer and shoot offense that he runs somewhat from the Baylor Art Briles system. With the wide splits that these receivers line up with, it makes it easy for quarterbacks and receivers to put up godly numbers in it. And that's why oftentimes when a lot of players that come out of this Tennessee offense get drafted into the NFL, they don't really make too many noise. Hendon Hooker, I felt probably was the best quarterback that ever played in a system like that had the ability to have success in the NFL. Unfortunately, his draft stock got ruined because he suffered an ACL injury late during his final season with the program. But if he never got injured, he definitely would have been a first-round pick because all throughout the entirety of Hendon Hooker's final season with the Vols, he was a projected first-rounder. I felt he was QB3 behind Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. He definitely was better than Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. And if Hendon Hooker was given the opportunity to start, he definitely would be way better than those guys. Joe Milton, he definitely benefits from playing in this offense. He wasn't that good at Michigan. He goes to Tennessee, and the offense was pretty much tailor-made for him to put up great numbers. But the receivers that have come out of this offense haven't had a lot of success. Jalen Hyatt won the Wide Receiver of the Year award. And yet, in the NFL, he hasn't done anything. His route running was criticized when he was going through the draft process, and his route running hasn't really been good in the NFL. He's been nothing but a bona fide deep threat. You just ask him to go run a post or a streak, and that's about all that he has in his route tree. You see, this offense is simplified so they can go at the speed that they do. This is the fastest offense in college football in terms of how many plays they are able to get out. And they're able to go at the up-tempo, fast pace that they do because everything is simplified. They don't really complicate it too much. They're not asking you to run these complex route combinations like how you would if you were playing for a school like a Ohio State, or if you played for Lincoln Riley at USC. So in some capacity, you can say that Tennessee's offense is anti-NFL. It doesn't really give the players in it the best chance to have success at the next level without having to take a year to make an adjustment. I'm not saying that it's impossible for players that play in Tennessee's offense to have successful NFL careers, but once you go from playing in this offense to playing in the NFL offense, it's an even bigger adjustment compared to a player that played in a more traditional offense that translated to NFL success. And when you play quarterback and you come out of this system, you pretty much have to reprogram yourself. Playing in this offense doesn't mean that you're unable to be a first-round pick, but it makes it a lot harder to make the transition from college football to the pros due to lack of correlation that this offense has from collegiate to pros. The reason why for most quarterbacks like Drake May, Michael Penix, and Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, why they had an easier transition from college football to the NFL is due to the offenses that they played in ran more NFL-style concepts that you would often see at that level in college. With Jaden Daniels going to Cliff Kingsbury, he somewhat runs a similar version of the offense that Josh Heupel does, but he kind of has transformed it to the NFL in some capacity, and that's why Jaden Daniels has success. But when you're playing in an offense that is quarterback friendly and everything is simplified, yeah, it kind of hurts your chances of being able to succeed at that next level because you pretty much have to relearn everything that you did prior to playing in this offense. So in some capacity, Nico Iamaleava and his camp, they are right about how this offense kind of hinders you for being ready for the National Football League. But if you're Josh Heupel, why would you change your offense for one player? Like he said, no player is bigger than the letter T. I don't know if he said the letter T or the power T. I'm going to just go and say the power T because I like that. No program is bigger than the power T. You're not just finna come in here, tell me that I need to change my offense. An offense that led us to the college football playoffs last year, led Hendon Hooker to being a Heisman finalist, led Joe Milton to being drafted. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Josh Heupel's number one priority is winning games. You can still be a successful NFL player from this offense. The transition just is a little bit more complicated. But that doesn't mean that you have no shot at having success in the NFL at all.